My name is Alara Vance, and until 3 days before my wedding to Julian Thorne, I believed in fairy tales. The kind where the handsome wealthy CEO actually falls for the bookish girl who prefers algorithms to art galleries. The kind where a blind date arranged by two prominent families turns into genuine love. The kind where the lavish, custom-designed wedding isn't just a social event, but the beginning of a shared life. I was wrong. Spectacularly, soul-crushingly wrong. It was a Tuesday. The scent of my wedding bouquet, peonies and jasmine, already seemed to permeate my apartment, trapped in the layers of silk samples and embossed invitation proofs. I was on my way to see Julian at the exclusive Luminary Club, a place of dark wood and darker secrets, to finalize the ceremony procession. He texted, running late with the boys. Meet you in my private lounge? Can't wait to see you, future Mrs. Thorne. A flutter went through me even then. Even now, I hate that part of myself. I didn't announce my arrival. The staff knew me, and with a sympathetic smile from the concierge, I was ushered toward the back corridors. The thick carpet swallowed my footsteps. As I approached the heavy oak door to Julian's usual room, left slightly ajar, the sound of male laughter and clinking glasses spilled out. I raised my hand to knock to let him know his bride had arrived when a name stopped me cold. Sophia Moreau. The voice belonged to Marcus, Julian's oldest friend. The air in the plush hallway suddenly felt thin. I froze, my hand hovering inches from the dark wood. Come on, Jules, Marcus pressed, his tone a blend of curiosity and challenge. We all thought you'd carry a torch for Sophia until you were both old and gray. This sudden shift to marital bliss with Alara. It's a bit swift even for you. Tell us the truth. Have you actually moved on? There was a pause. A pause that stretched, filled only with the faint hiss of carbonation in a glass. Then the sound of a slow, deliberate exhale. I could picture it perfectly. Julian leaning back in his leather armchair, taking a drag from one of his rare cigarettes, the smoke curling like a ghost in the lamplight. Moved on. Julian's voice was low, tinged with a melancholy so profound it felt like a physical object in the room. How do you move on from a piece of your own soul? I loved Sophia for 15 years. From the first day I saw her in our freshman philosophy class until now. She's not a memory, Marcus. She's the blueprint. Everything else is just. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The silence that followed was more eloquent than any speech. My own heart, which had been beating a happy, anticipatory rhythm for my fiancé, simply stopped. A cold, sharp numbness spread from my core out to my fingertips. 15 years. A blueprint. The words echoed in the hollow space my hope had vacated. It's tragic, really, another friend, Leo, chimed in. You and Sophia always star-crossed. Bad timing, family drama. It's like the universe enjoys messing with you too. Maybe it does, Julian replied, and I heard the shrug in his voice. But life isn't a romance novel. Most people end up marrying for reasons other than epic love. Life goes on. And your fiancé? Marcus asked. Alara Vance. I've met her. Stunning, sharp, comes from the Vance academic dynasty. It's not exactly a downgrade. A soft, humorless chuckle from Julian. She's acceptable. My parents are thrilled. Her parents are placated. It's a suitable merger. Acceptable. Suitable merger. I was a corporate acquisition. A favorable stock. And you're just okay with that? Leo probed. It doesn't matter who it is, Julian stated, his voice turning flat, practical. The function is the same. Once she provides an heir, once the Thorne legacy is secured, we can amicably part ways. The numbness began to recede, replaced by a rising tide of ice-clear horror. I pressed a hand against the wall to steady myself. Wait, so this is a long game play? Marcus sounded intrigued, not appalled. You get married, have a kid to please the dynasty, then divorce so you can be with Sophia? Precisely. Julian's tone was chillingly matter-of-fact. The Thornes would never accept Sophia now. Not after her divorce, not with a child in tow. They see it as damaged goods. He spat the last words with a venom I'd never heard him use. But once I'm a divorced father myself, the hypocrisy loses its power. They won't have a moral leg to stand on. We'll finally be on equal footing. A glass clinked decisively. I don't believe they'll be able to stop us then. The conversation moved on to sports and stock prices, As if they hadn't just dissected my future and discarded it. As if my life, my love, my potential motherhood, were just strategic moves on a chessboard where Sophia was the queen and I was a pawn to be sacrificed. I stood there, my back against the cool wall, for what felt like an eternity. The initial shock solidified into a hard, crystalline understanding. Every tender moment, every whispered promise, every time he'd looked at me with what I thought was awe. It was a performance. A brilliantly executed one. I'd been living inside a beautiful, gilded lie, and the architect was the man I'd trusted with my heart. The man who saw my family's respectability, my health, my very womb as a convenient resource. The man who planned to use my love to create a child he wanted only as a prop, and then cast me aside. The man who, right now, pitted himself for his tragic romance while orchestrating mine. A quiet, fierce fire ignited in the ashes of my devastation. It was a cold fire, one of pure survival. I didn't burst in. I didn't scream or throw things. The Alara who would have done that died in that hallway. Instead, I took a silent, shuddering breath, turned on my heel and walked away. My steps were steady, my posture straight. I nodded politely to the concierge, exited the Luminary Club into the crisp autumn air and hailed a cab. Inside, staring at the blur of the city, the plan began to form. It wasn't about winning him back. It was about ensuring the trap he'd so carefully built would snap shut on him. He wanted a wedding. He would get a spectacle. He wanted a merger. He would get a market crash. He thought I was a pawn. He was about to learn I was a player. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Running a little longer, darling. Can't wait to hug you. Thinking of you. A wave of nausea hit me so strongly I had to roll down the window. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I stared at the message, at the pet name he'd sullied, and my fingers moved with a will of their own. No rush, I typed back. Take your time with your friends. I got caught up with florist details anyway. See you soon, future Mr. Vance. I added a heart emoji. The same one I'd always used. If he could act, so could I. And my performance would be Oscar-worthy. When I arrived at my apartment, a light-filled space we'd chosen together, already half-filled with shared belongings, I moved with a methodical calm. I poured a glass of water, sat at my sleek desk and opened my laptop. First I checked flights. The wedding was Saturday. I booked a one-way ticket to Zurich, leaving at 6:05 a.m. from a private airfield, under a corporate transport service so obscure even the Thorns wouldn't think to check it. Payment was routed through an old, separate trust fund from my grandmother. Next, I accessed the cloud storage for the home security system of the penthouse we'd bought as our forever home. Julian had installed it, boasting about its top-tier privacy. He'd forgotten I was a systems engineer by training. I'd quietly set up a mirrored backup feed weeks ago. A quirky project I'd mentioned was to capture our happy moments. He'd patted my head and called me adorable. Now I scanned the recent activity. Nothing yet. I set up motion-triggered recording alerts for the entire premises. Then I opened my social media. Our joint account, the Thorn Vance Chronicles, was a curated monument to our perfect love. I scrolled through photos. Us hiking, him feeding me sushi, our engagement party where he'd cried. The comments were a sea of envy and congratulations. And there, like a persistent toxic weed, was a comment from a user named @EchoofYesterday on our latest wedding photo. He looks like he's attending a board meeting, not a wedding altar. Just an observation. Others had jumped to our defense. Jealous much? They're gorgeous. Get a life. @EchoofYesterday had replied. Time reveals all truths. A cold suspicion settled in my gut. I clicked on the profile. Private, few followers. But 3 posts were public. One from over a year ago was a photo taken at Lake Geneva. The back of a man holding a little boy on his shoulders, both silhouetted against the setting sun. Caption, Pie World. I knew that jacket. The set of those shoulders. The way the hair curled at the nape of the neck. It was Julian. The timestamp coincided with his sudden investor trip to Frankfurt. Another post from last week was a plane ticket confirmation, blurred but not enough. New York to Chicago. The caption, Coming home. Some dramas are just too good to miss. The final post was a quote posted just an hour ago. The best revenge is living well. And sometimes, watching the carefully laid plans of others unravel spectacularly. Sophia Moreau. Had to be. She wasn't just a ghost from his past. She was an active spectator lurking in my comments, waiting for her moment. He knew. He was in on it. The sheer audacity of her contempt took my breath away. A key turned in the lock. I swiftly closed my laptop, arranging my face into what I hoped was a serene, slightly tired smile. Julian walked in, shedding his charcoal overcoat. He looked devastatingly handsome, a faint hint of smoke and sandalwood clinging to him. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, found mine, and he immediately smiled, that soft, private smile I'd thought was meant only for me. "Elara," he breathed, crossing the room in quick strides. He pulled me into his arms, burying his face in my hair. "God, I missed you today." Those meetings were interminable. I forced my body to relax into his, to loop my arms around his neck. "I missed you too." The words were ash in my mouth. He leaned back, cupping my face. "You're cold. Everything okay?" "Just a long day," I murmured, leaning into his touch, betraying every screaming nerve in my body. "Wedding planning is more exhausting than my thesis defense." He laughed, a warm, rich sound that had once made my knees weak. Now it sounded like a well-rehearsed line. "Soon it'll all be over and it'll just be you and me." He kissed my forehead. "My beautiful, brilliant wife." Wife. A temporary title. A placeholder. I looked up at him, searching his face for any flicker of the monstrous calculation I'd overheard. All I saw was practiced affection. He was a master. "Julian," I said softly, playing my part. "This is all real, right? You and me? We're not just a good match on paper." His expression shifted instantly to one of wounded sincerity. He took my hands, holding them to his chest where I could feel the steady, lying beat of his heart. "Elara Vance, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. Paper be damned. I fell for you the moment you argued with me about quantum computing over that terrible club sandwich. You're my future." He sounded so convincing. The perfect blend of romance and specificity. The club sandwich detail, it was real, it was ours. He was weaponizing our memories. I made my eyes shimmer, injecting just the right amount of vulnerable emotion. I love you so much." The thought of this not being real. He pulled me into a fierce, possessive hug. "It is real. This is everything." He whispered it into my hair, a vow. And in that moment, wrapped in the arms of the man who saw me as a broodmare and a stepping stone, my resolve hardened into diamond. He wanted a performance? He wanted a perfect, pliable wife to complete his cynical plan? Fine. But the finale would be one he never saw coming. The runaway bride wasn't just going to run. She was going to burn the entire wedding down on her way out. I slept beside Julian that night, a monument of stillness. Every instinct screamed to flee the bed, to scrub my skin raw where he'd touched me. But I lay there, matching my breathing to his feigned sleep, my mind a humming control center plotting its counteroffensive. The love I'd felt had been a beautiful, chaotic garden. Now it was paved over, cold and flat, a runway for my exit. The next morning he was all tender concern. "You were so quiet last night, my love." Still worried. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. A gesture that had once made me melt. Now it was a branding iron of deceit. I mustered a soft, vulnerable smile. "Just pre-wedding jitters, I think. It's all so big." I let my voice waver. "I keep thinking, what if I trip? What if I forget my vows?" He chuckled, a low, comforting sound. "You could show up in pajamas and recite the phone book, and I'd still think you were the most magnificent creature on earth." He kissed my temple. "It's just us, Elara. Remember? Just you and me against the world. Just you and me until my real world arrives." The hypocrisy was a sour taste I swallowed down. "I know. I'm being silly. It's just a lot of pressure." "Then let me take some off," he said, his tone shifting to practical, supportive. "I have to pick up an old friend from overseas today. She's flying in for the wedding. It might take a few hours. Why don't you take the day? Spa massage disconnect. My treat." The word hung in the sun-dappled kitchen air. He was telling me. Or rather, he was weaving the lie into the fabric of our normalcy so her presence wouldn't seem abnormal later. I widened my eyes, feigning innocent curiosity. "An old friend? From where?" "Switzerland. We went to university together. He's had a tough few years. Coming back for the wedding means a lot." He delivered the lines with just the right blend of nostalgia and pity. I want to make sure she's settled. I nodded, the picture of gracious understanding. Of course. Old friends are important. You should absolutely be there for her. I tilted my head. Do you want me to come? To help her feel welcome. A micro-expression, a flicker of panic, crossed his face before being smoothed into grateful regret. That's so sweet of you, darling. But she's jet-lagged and probably emotional. Let me handle the first reunion. I'll introduce you properly at the rehearsal dinner. She's eager to meet you. I bet she is. I smiled brightly. Hey. Well, I'll probably just lounge here and finalize the seating chart. Have a wonderful time. The moment the door closed behind him, the placid mask shattered. I moved with a silent, furious efficiency. First, the penthouse. I packed a single carry-on-sized suitcase with essentials. Passports, diplomas, professional certificates, a few pieces of jewelry that were mine alone, the simple diamond studs from my grandmother. I left everything Julian had ever given me, the Cartier watch, the pearl necklace, the absurdly large emerald pendant, laid out neatly on the bed like museum exhibits. I wanted no relics of this lie. My larger, personal belongings, books, research notes, childhood mementos, art supplies, I had already been quietly boxing for weeks, telling Julian it was early organization for the move. He'd found it charmingly neurotic. Now I called a discreet bonded courier service and had every box shipped to my oldest friend, Lena Chen's downtown loft. The destination was registered under her design studio's name. Next, I turned to my digital arsenal. I created a new encrypted cloud drive. Into it, I dumped every piece of the life we'd built together. The mirrored security feeds from the penthouse, screenshots of an echo of yesterday's posts, audio recordings I'd secretly begun making of our conversations since the night at the Luminary Club, his lies, my leading questions, copies of our prenuptial agreement that heavily favored the Thorne dynasty, and the damning flight itinerary for Sophia Moreau that I'd managed to trace through a backdoor in Julian's travel agent's website. It was a digital coffin and I was carefully arranging the nails. Then I made the call I'd been mentally rehearsing. Lena. Alara. Kinda weird. Nerves. Lena's voice was instant concern. No. I need you to listen and not to react until I'm done. I laid it out cold and clean. The overheard conversation. The blueprint. The pawn. The planned pregnancy and divorce. The silence on the other end was volcanic. Then a hissed, that absolute soulless bastard. I'm leaving. The morning of the wedding. I need your help with the finale. Name it. Do you want me to break his kneecaps? I know a guy. A ghost of a smile touched my lips. Better. I want you to be the master of ceremonies for his public execution. I outlined the plan for the video. The need for a public playback at the precise moment. Her role as my furious, righteous proxy. He'll try to stop it, she said, already thinking tactically. He'll be too busy chasing a ghost. I'll handle my exit. You handle the spectacle. Consider it done. I'm so sorry. Don't be. Rage is more useful right now. And it was. The grief was a luxury for later, for a safe distance. Next, I needed transportation he couldn't intercept. Julian's influence was a net cast wide over the city. Commercial flights, trains, even high-end car services, he could have them watched or frozen. I needed a bird he didn't know existed. Which led me to the second more dangerous call. Kieran Blackwood. Blackwood was the antithesis of Julian Thorne. Where Julian was old money, polished granite, and ruthless order, Kieran was new money volatility, a self-made storm in the tech and venture capital world. Their rivalry was legendary, a clash of empires and ideologies. They loathed each other. I'd only met Blackwood once at a stifling charity gala. He'd looked at Julian's possessive hand on my back, then at me and said with a smirk, "And what do you do, Ms. Vance, when you're not being a magnificent accessory?" Julian had stiffened. I'd answered coolly, "I design neural networks that can predict systemic collapse." "And you?" He'd laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. "Touché." I found his private line through a labyrinth of professional contacts. He answered on the second ring, voice laced with bored curiosity. "Alara Vance. To what do I owe the unexpected pleasure? Shouldn't you be choosing between ivory and eggshell for your napkins? I need a helicopter extraction from the Grand Legacy Hotel at 10:45 a.m. on Saturday, and immediate transit to a private jet at West Haven Airfield, pre-cleared for takeoff to Zurich. There was a long pause. I could almost hear him recalibrating. Runaway bride? He guessed, his tone shifting from bored to keenly interested. Disenchanted asset, I corrected. And I have a severance package you'll find very valuable. What kind of value? The kind that involves proprietary Thorn Holdings financial projections, their blind bids on the Docklands development, and the internal audit trails for 3 of their Asian subsidiaries that would make regulators weep with joy. Another pause, sharper. This was his language. You have proof of access? I have the files. Half now as a gesture of good faith. The other half upon my safe arrival in Zurich. The helicopter is my delivery fee. He let out a low whistle. Thorn really did a number on you, didn't he? I knew he was cold, but to drive his perfect fiancée into the arms of his worst enemy, it's almost poetic. This isn't about driving me into anyone's arms, Mr. Blackwood. This is a business transaction. I provide you with a competitive edge. You provide me with an exit strategy his net can't catch. Do we have a deal? Conditions, he said, all business now. The transfer of the first half happens now via my secure server. The helicopter will be there, but if the data is bogus, it leaves without you. If it's good, you get your ride. The second half is transmitted by you from the tarmac in Zurich, before you board your commercial connection. My jet brings you to Zurich, that's the deal. After that, you're on your own. Agreed. I had no intention of staying on his jet a second longer than necessary. Zurich was a hub. From there I would vanish into a maze of trains to my final destination. A quiet, tech-friendly city in the Bavarian Alps he'd never think to look. We exchanged encrypted details. My fingers flew over the keyboard, partitioning the files I'd compiled. The financial data was real. As the future Mrs. Thorn, I'd been given insight into the empire I was to help steward. Julian, in his arrogance, had shown me things to impress me. I'd remembered. I'd recorded. The transfer initiated. Minutes ticked by. I stared at the penthouse, at the life I'd curated. The abstract painting we'd bought together at a gallery opening, the ridiculous gold-plated espresso machine he loved, the stack of wedding magazines by the sofa. It all looked like a staged set. As it was. My phone buzzed. Blackwood. Data's verified. Impressive. The helicopter will be at the designated roof location. My assistant, Leo, will be your point of contact. He'll have a phone for you. Don't be late. I won't. One more thing, Miss Vance. Why come to me? You could have just run. He needs to understand, I said, my voice glacial, that I was never just a piece on his board. I was a player on a bigger one. And you, Mr. Blackwood, are the checkmate he never saw coming. I ended the call. The final piece was in place. As dusk fell, Julian returned. He smelled of crisp air and, faintly, a floral perfume that wasn't mine. His eyes were brighter, charged with a secret energy. The energy of a reunion. How was your friend? I asked, stirring a pot of tomato bisque I had no intention of eating. Good. Tired. Grateful to be home. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. She asked about you. Said she can't wait to see the woman who finally captured me. I leaned back into him, playing my part. That's sweet. Is she staying long? She's not sure. Maybe indefinitely. His voice was carefully neutral. It's a fresh start for her. Well, we should have her over. After the honeymoon. The honeymoon that will never happen. Of course. He nuzzled my neck. You're amazing, you know that? So understanding. That night as he slept, I accessed the mirrored security feed from our wedding house, a stunning modern villa on the river. I checked it obsessively all day. The living room camera showed nothing for hours. Then at 9:47 p.m. the front door disengaged. Julian walked in, but he wasn't alone. A woman, willowy with a cascade of honey blonde hair, followed, holding the hand of a small, sleepy boy. Sylvia. She looked around, a smile playing on her lips, a smile of appraisal, of ownership. Julian took her coat. They didn't speak. They simply moved into each other's arms, a long, deep kiss that was not one of greeting but of homecoming. The child stood nearby, clutching a stuffed toy, watching with familiar disinterest. I watched dry-eyed as the kiss deepened, as his hands tangled in her hair, as they slowly sank onto the cream-colored sofa I had chosen. The nausea returned, but I forced myself to watch. I needed to see the evidence. I needed to feel the final death of my illusions. I recorded the feed. He had brought her to our house. The ultimate desecration. The ultimate confidence in his deception. My phone lying beside my pillow lit up with a text from him. Sent just now as he was presumably wrapped around her. Can't sleep. Just lying here thinking of you. Of Saturday. Of forever. The disconnect was psychopathic. I typed back, my hands steady. I'm thinking of you too. Forever starts so soon. Sweet dreams, my love. I added a kiss emoji. Then I opened the secure app Leo had sent and forwarded the security footage to Lena. Exhibit A, I typed. For the premiere. The trap was set. The actors were in place. Julian Thorne, the master strategist, was so busy admiring his own plan, he didn't see the ground crumbling beneath his feet. I was no longer Alara Vance, the betrayed bride. I was the architect. And at dawn on Saturday, I would bring his beautifully constructed world down in ruins. The day before the wedding dawned with a cruel, pristine clarity. Sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows, glinting off the untouched espresso machine and illuminating dust motes dancing over my abandoned wedding gown, which hung like a spectral promise in the corner. I felt eerily calm, a deep-sea diver in the silent, pressurized zone before the ascent. Every emotion had been compressed into a cold, dense core of purpose. Julian was already awake, pretending to be engrossed in the financial news on his tablet. The performance of normalcy was becoming a taut wire between us. I could see the faint shadows under his eyes. Had his night with Sophia been fraught with guilt, or simply logistics? I didn't care. I poured myself a glass of water, the ice clinking a sharp, solitary sound. Big day today, he said, not looking up. Final fittings. Rehearsal. The Last Supper as a free man. He attempted a jovial tone, but it fell flat. I murmured, leaning against the counter. Nervous. Finally, he glanced at me, his storm-gray eyes searching my face. Not nervous. Just eager. To have it done. To have you. He set the tablet down and came over, his hands settling on my hips. You're very quiet, Alara. I met his gaze steadily, allowing a veil of vulnerability to cloud my own. It's just, it all becomes real today, doesn't it? The rehearsing, the vows in front of everyone. I had a nightmare last night that I was at the altar and I'd forgotten every word. That I was just standing there, silent, in front of everyone. His expression softened into the patronizing warmth I now saw so clearly. Oh darling, that's just anxiety. The words will come. And if they don't, I'll say enough for both of us. He kissed my forehead. You'll be flawless. You always are. Flawless. Like a well-programmed doll. I managed a wobbly smile. I hope so. I should get ready. Lena's picking me up for the final dress fitting in an hour. Send me pictures, he said, his thumbs rubbing circles on my skin. A possessive, habitual gesture. I want a preview of my breathtaking bride. The thought of him looking at my image, fantasizing not about me but about the strategic milestone I represented, made my skin crawl. Maybe, I teased lightly, extracting myself. Some traditions should be kept. The moment I was in the sleek black town car with Lena, the mask shattered. She took one look at me and gripped my hand. Jesus, Alara. You look like you're going to your own execution. In a way I am, I said, my voice flat. The execution of Alara Vance, the gullible fiancé. The new one gets born tomorrow. I handed her a small hardened USB drive. The video. Cued and ready. Password is blueprint. Don't lose it. He pocketed it like a sacred relic. I've got it. The AV guy at the Grand Legacy is an old friend from college. He's already been gifted a bottle of very expensive scotch and is deeply sympathetic to the cause of scorned women everywhere. The feed will cut to your video at exactly 11:17 a.m., right after the officiant asks who gives the bride away. Your father will have just sat down. The spotlight will be empty. It'll be perfect. I nodded, watching the city blur past. And the mannequin? Dressed and positioned. He's a beauty. Looks eerily like you from behind. I even used your perfume. The dress fitting was a surreal pantomime. In the hushed plush salon, surrounded by mirrors and the saccharine cooing of consultants, I stood like a mannequin myself as they pinned and fussed over the ivory silk and French lace. The dress was a masterpiece, severe and architectural, exactly what I'd wanted when I believed I was building a future. Now it felt like a costume for a role I was quitting. "You're so still, Miss Vance," the head seamstress remarked. "Most brides are crying or laughing." "I'm just taking it all in," I lied, my voice a distant echo. Lena took pictures on her phone, the flash popping. I knew she'd send one to Julian, a necessary part of the charade. I tilted my chin, affecting a look of serene anticipation. For the portfolio, I thought bitterly. From there we went to the grand legacy for the rehearsal. The ballroom was a cavernous space of draped ivory silk and towering floral installations of white hydrangea and blush roses. It smelled like a funeral home. Our families mingled. The distinguished Vances with their understated elegance, the formidable Thorns with their imposing polish. Julian's mother, Genevieve, swept over, air-kissing my cheeks. "Alara, my dear." Radiant. Just a hint of shadows under the eyes, but nothing a good night's sleep won't fix. Her scrutiny was clinical. "Tomorrow you become a Thorn. Remember, it's a performance from the moment you step out of the car. Smile but not too widely. Grace but not timidity. You represent the family now." "Of course, Genevieve," I said, my smile perfectly calibrated. "I've been practicing my representation." She missed the irony, patting my arm. "Good girl." The rehearsal itself was a farce conducted with solemn gravity. We walked through the motions. My father practiced escorting me down the endless aisle. Julian and I stood before the pretend officiant, repeating the hollow vows. His hand was warm around mine, his voice firm and sure as he promised to love, honor, and cherish. I echoed the words, each one a silent curse. And then during a break she arrived. Sophia Moreau glided into the ballroom as if summoned by the tension. She wore a simple but devastatingly cut dove-gray dress, her son Leo clinging to her hand. She was beautiful in a fragile, ethereal way that spoke of curated suffering. A murmur rippled through the Thorn contingent. Julian stiffened beside me, then smoothly disengaged. "Sophia, you made it." His voice was a careful blend of warmth and distance, a masterpiece of duplicity. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she said, her voice a soft, melodic thing. Her eyes, a startling cerulean blue, swept over me. "You must be Alara. Julian has told me so much about you." The way she said it implied he'd told her everything, the punchline of a private joke. "All good things, I hope," I said, extending my hand. My smile was placid, polite. The smile of a woman who suspected nothing. She took my hand, her grip cool and faintly limp. "Of course. He's so happy." The pause was infinitesimal but laden. "I've been away so long. It's wonderful to see him settled." Lena materialized at my elbow, a champagne flute in each hand. "Settled? Like a pond or a legal dispute?" she asked brightly, handing me a glass. Sophia's smile tightened. "I just mean he seems content." "Oh, he's more than content," Lena chirped. "He's ecstatic. Talks about Alara nonstop. It's almost nauseating." She took a sip, her eyes never leaving Sophia's. "You know how men are when they finally find the one. They just gush." Julian's jaw ticked. "Lena, perhaps we should." But Sophia's son chose that moment to tug on Julian's trousers. "Daddy, I'm hungry." The word dropped into the conversation like a stone in a still pool. My parents, who had been approaching, froze. Genevieve Thorne's face went as pale as the hydrangeas. A beat of utter, ringing silence. Then Sophia gave a light, tinkling laugh, bending to scoop the boy up. "Leo, darling, we talked about this. Uncle Julian. Remember? He's like a daddy because yours is far away." She looked at me, her eyes wide with faux apology. "I'm so sorry. Julian has been so kind to us, a real father figure since we returned." Leo gets confused. The boy, perhaps 4 years old, frowned. "But Mommy, you said." "Leo," she said, her voice sharpening a fraction before smoothing back over. "Why don't you tell everyone what you learned about dinosaurs?" A blatant, clumsy diversion. Julian recovered, his arms snaking around my waist, a gesture of solidarity that felt like a cage. "Kids say the darndest things, don't they?" His laugh was strained. "He's a great kid. We've spent some time together." I looked from Julian's tense face to Sophia's carefully crafted mask of embarrassment to the boy's confused pout. The pieces of their sordid little drama were laid bare in this public, glittering room. The arrogance of it was breathtaking. They hadn't even bothered to fully coach the child. I let the silence stretch for a moment longer, letting the discomfort deepen before I laughed. It was a light, genuine-sounding laugh. Oh, it's no problem at all. Lena's godchildren call her Mommy Lena, all the time. It's sweet. I reached out and gently booped Leo's nose. And dinosaurs are much more interesting than wedding rehearsals, aren't they? The tension broke but into awkward fragments. My mother gave me a searching look. Genevieve Thorne was glaring at Sophia with undisguised venom. Julian looked relieved, but the glance he exchanged with Sophia was charged with panic? With collusion? The rest of the rehearsal passed in a blur of forced normalcy. The dinner that followed was a 9-course ordeal. I was seated between Julian and his stoic father, Archibald Thorne. Sophia and Leo were placed far down the table, but I could feel her gaze like a cold spot on my skin. Halfway through the filet mignon, my phone on my lap under the table vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Leo Blackwood's assistant. Asset in position. Green for go. Confirmation needed for 0645 delivery. I typed a single character under the tablecloth. Everything all right, dear? Archibald's gravelly voice inquired. Perfect, I said, smiling as I slipped the phone back into my clutch. Just Lena sending me silly memes to calm my nerves. Later, in the penthouse bathroom, as I scrubbed the makeup from my face, Julian leaned against the doorframe. You were amazing today, he said, his reflection watching me in the mirror. With Sophia, with Leo, you were so graceful. I know that was awkward. I met his reflected gaze. Why would it be awkward? She's an old friend. The child is adorable if confused. I turned, leaning back against the sink. Unless there's something I should find awkward, Julian? His eyes held mine, and for a fleeting second I saw a crack. A flicker of something that might have been shame or fear. But it was gone, sealed over by practiced sincerity. No, nothing. I just appreciate you. More than you know. He crossed the space and kissed me deeply, trying to summon the passion of our earlier days. I responded because the script required it, but my mind was elsewhere. It was on roof extraction points, encrypted data transfers, and the face of a mannequin in a wedding dress. That night, as he slept the shallow sleep of the guilty, I did my final checks. My single suitcase was by the service entrance. The encrypted drive with the second half of Blackwood's data was in a hidden compartment in my purse. The ticket for the train from Zurich to Garmisch-Partenkirchen was confirmed. I opened the security feed one last time. The wedding house was dark and still. No sign of Sophia or the boy. They were likely in a hotel waiting for their moment. I wondered if she was as confident as she seemed, or if she too felt the ground shifting. At 5 a.m. my alarm would vibrate silently. Julian would wake at 7, expecting to find me sipping tea and reviewing my vows. Instead, he would find an empty apartment, my engagement ring left in a small dish by the sink, and a single printed note. I didn't write a confession. I didn't write an explanation. I wrote only a line from a systems engineering textbook I'd studied at MIT. Any complex system that fails to account for the agency of its constituent parts is inherently unstable and doomed to collapse. He could puzzle over that while his world fell apart. As the first hint of pearl gray light touched the skyline, I lay awake, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. The grief was there, a vast, cold ocean beneath the ice of my resolve. But I wouldn't drown in it. I would use it as ballast. Tomorrow Ilara Vance would walk down the aisle. But she would not be the one in the dress. And she would be walking toward a future he could never touch, built not on his lies, but on the ashes of his betrayal. The dress rehearsal was over. The real performance was about to begin. At 5 a.m. the world was a study in monochrome. The silent vibration against my wrist was the only sound, a tiny, insistent earthquake in the profound stillness. Beside me, Julian slept on, his face softened in repose, the ruthless strategist momentarily erased. For a heartbeat I just watched him. This was the last time I would see him unawares. The last time I would occupy the same space as the man I'd thought was my destiny. The finality of it was a cold, clean cut. I slipped from the bed, a ghost in my own home. My movements were practiced, silent. In the walk-in closet, I dressed not in the silk robe he'd given me, but in the simple, expensive cashmere separates and flat boots I'd laid out the night before. Clothes for traveling, for anonymity, for a life of motion. I left the wedding dress hanging like a shed chrysalis. In the kitchen, I poured a glass of water and took a final survey. The penthouse, a stage set for a life that never was. I placed my engagement ring, a flawless emerald-cut diamond that had felt like a promise, then a shackle, into a small crystal dish by the sink. Next to it I laid the folded note with its clinical, damning quote. A goodbye meant not to wound emotionally, but to indict intellectually. Let him feel outsmarted. It would hurt his pride more than any tearful letter. My single suitcase was a compact, hard-shell black rectangle by the service entrance. I shouldered a leather satchel containing my laptop, passports, and the drive for Blackwood. My pulse was steady, a metronome counting down the seconds to my freedom. At 5:45 a.m., Lena's text came through. Stage is set. Mannequin is in position looking hauntingly vacant. AV guy is on standby. I'm dressed and ready to play my part as the furious best friend. Break a leg. Or better yet, break his. A faint smile touched my lips. See you on the other side, I typed back. The plan was a precise, interlocking mechanism. Julian would leave the penthouse at 7:30 a.m. for the Grand Legacy Hotel to get ready with his groomsmen. My bridal suite was booked there, of course. Lena and my mother would arrive at the suite at 8 a.m., expecting to find me in a state of pre-wedding bliss. They would instead find the mannequin, dressed and veiled, seated by the window, and a letter from me to my parents explaining enough to ensure they wouldn't panic or alert Julian prematurely. My own escape had to happen before the hotel was swarming with thorns. The roof of the Grand Legacy had a helipad, used for VIP arrivals and media shots. Blackwood's asset, a sleek, unmarked Augusta helicopter, would be there at 6:45 a.m., its arrival logged as a pre-approved charter for a corporate partner. Leo, Blackwood's assistant, would be waiting. At 6:15 I took one last, slow breath in the muted foyer. Then I opened the service door and stepped into the concrete and steel reality of the back staircase. The door clicked shut behind me with a sound of absolute finality. The descent was 22 floors. My footsteps echoed in the hollow shaft, a solitary drumbeat. I emerged into the basement loading dock, the air thick with the smell of diesel and damp concrete. A service elevator took me up to the hotel's main kitchen level. From there, it was a maze of white-tiled corridors, following the discreet signs for helipad access. I moved with the confidence of someone who belonged, my head down, my pace purposeful. A few early-rising hotel staff passed me with barely a glance. I was just another well-dressed guest on an unusual errand. The final door led to the roof. The morning wind hit me, sharp and bracing, carrying the distant hum of the waking city. The sky was a watercolor wash of rose and gold. And there, on the marked circle, sat the helicopter, its blades still, a dark silhouette against the dawn. A man in a dark suit, Leo, stood beside it holding a tablet. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice clipped and efficient. "Right on time. Please board. We have a narrow window. No pleasantries." I liked that. I handed him the satchel. "The second data set is on the drive. Password is Thornfall. Transmit your confirmation to Mr. Blackwood from the air." He took it, gave a short nod, and handed me a burner phone. "This is clean. Pre-programmed with one number. Mine. Discard it after you're clear in Europe." I climbed into the plush interior of the helicopter. It was eerily quiet, all sound-dampening luxury. Leo followed, sealing the door. He spoke to the pilot through a headset, and moments later the engine whined to life, the blades beginning their slow then furious rotation. The world outside became a blur of vibration and noise. As we lifted off, the city fell away beneath us, shrinking into a grid of glittering toys. I saw the serpentine curve of the river, the thumbprint of Central Park, and there the gleaming spire of the Thorn Holdings building. I felt nothing but a vast, hollow relief. We banked, turning north, and the Grand Legacy Hotel, my intended altar, slid into view and then was gone. Leo worked on his tablet, connecting the drive. Minutes later he looked up. "Data is verified and received. Mr. Blackwood sends his compliments and says the show downtown is about to begin." He handed me the tablet. On it was a live feed, seemingly from a guest's phone, of the Grand Legacy Ballroom. It was filling up. I saw the sea of hats and morning suits, the glitter of jewels. The camera panned and found Julian, standing near the altar with his groomsmen. He looked impossibly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, a faint, expectant smile on his face. He checked his watch, then glanced toward the entrance, the picture of an eager groom. My stomach twisted, but not with regret. With a cold, vindictive satisfaction. The flight to West Haven Airfield took 18 minutes. On the ground, a black SUV whisked us across the tarmac to where a Gulfstream G650 sat, engines already whining. The transfer was seamless. Within 10 minutes of landing, I was strapped into a leather seat in the jet's cabin, a glass of chilled water in my hand. Leo stood at the doorway. "This is where I leave you, Ms. Vance. The flight plan is filed for Zurich. The pilot has his instructions. Good luck." "Thank you, Leo. Tell Mr. Blackwood the pleasure was all his." He almost smiled, then turned and left. The cabin door sealed with a hiss of pressurized air. Through the window I watched the SUV drive away. Then the jet began to move, taxiing smoothly toward the runway. As we accelerated and lifted into the boundless blue, the true weight of the last few days settled upon me. It wasn't grief, not yet. It was a profound, bone-deep exhaustion and a surreal sense of dislocation. I was untethered, a satellite flung from its orbit. The life I'd known was gone. The future was a blank page. I opened the burner phone and navigated to a live streaming site. The wedding feed was being carried by a society blog. The time was 11:12 a.m. On screen the ceremony had begun. The officiant, a respected judge, was speaking. The camera showed my parents in the front row, my mother's face a mixture of joy and nerves. My father looked stoic. They didn't know yet. They still thought I was in the bridal suite, being laced into my dress. Then the moment. The judge's voice boomed through the speakers. "Who presents this woman to be married to this man?" My father stood as rehearsed. His voice was clear. "Her mother and I do." He sat down. All eyes turned to the vast carved oak doors at the back of the ballroom. The string quartet began the first trembling notes of Pachelbel's canon. The doors remained closed. A beat of silence. A murmur rustled through the crowd. Julian's smile faltered. He looked toward the doors, then to his best man Marcus, who shrugged minutely. The music played on, looping into an awkward, unanswered question. On my screen I saw Julian's posture stiffen. He took a step forward, his brow furrowed. He checked his watch again, a gesture of pure panic this time. Then the giant LED screen behind the altar, meant to display a montage of our love story later in the reception, flickered to life. But it wasn't smiling photos that appeared. It was me. My face, pale and serious, filled the screen. I was sitting in my own living room wearing a simple black sweater. The shot was intimate, stark. My recorded voice, calm and clear as cut glass, rang out through the suddenly silent ballroom. "If you're watching this, Julian, then the wedding is underway. And I am not there." A collective, audible gasp swept through the ballroom. Julian's face went bone white. He took another stumbling step forward as if he could reach into the screen. "I wasn't there when you brought Sophia Moreau to our wedding house 3 nights ago either," my image continued. "But the security system was." The video cut. And there it was in high-definition glory for 500 of society's most influential people to see. Julian and Sophia, locked in a passionate, desperate kiss on the cream-colored sofa I had chosen. The footage was silent, but the body language screamed of intimacy, of history, of a claim staked. The gasp turned into a roar of shock. I saw people turning to each other, hands flying to mouths. Julian's mother, Genevieve, shot to her feet, her hand clawing at her chest. My own mother buried her face in my father's shoulder. On screen, Julian was frozen, a statue of horror. He spun, yelling something at the AV booth, but the video rolled on, merciless. Cut back to me. "You told your friends I was a suitable merger. A blueprint for the life you really wanted. That you would marry me, I would have your child, and then you would divorce me so you could finally be with her, once we were on equal footing." I recited his words verbatim, my voice never wavering. "You said I was acceptable. You said it didn't matter who you married. You saw my family, my future, my potential motherhood as tools for your own ends." The camera zoomed in on my face, my eyes glittering with a fury I had never let him see. "Well, Julian Thorne, here is my RSVP. I decline. I am not a pawn on your board. I am a player you failed to comprehend. And this." The video showed a final, fleeting shot of the mannequin in the bridal suite, its back to the camera. "This is all the bride you deserve." The screen went black. For a second there was perfect, pandemonium-ready silence. Then chaos erupted. Guests were on their feet, shouting, phones raised. Reporters at the back scrambled. Julian was visibly shouting, pointing at the blank screen, then toward the exit. He shoved past his groomsmen and broke into a run, his wedding finery a absurd contrast to his frantic, desperate sprint up the aisle. The live feed cut out abruptly. The Society blogs page refreshed to a banner that read, "Ceremony halted. Allegations of infidelity. Bride missing." I leaned back in the plush seat, the adrenaline draining from me, leaving a profound, trembling emptiness. I had done it. I had turned his perfect, cynical plan into the most spectacular public implosion the city had likely ever seen. The jet soared above the clouds, a realm of silent, sun-drenched peace. Below, in the world I'd left behind, the shockwaves were just beginning to spread. The news would be everywhere. The social media dissection would be brutal. The Thorne dynasty was wounded, perhaps mortally, by its heir's hubris. I closed my eyes. The vengeful architect was gone. Now I was just a woman in a metal tube hurtling toward an unknown horizon. The first act of my revenge was complete. The second act, building a life worth the scorched earth I'd left behind, was about to begin. But first I slept. A deep, dreamless sleep, untroubled by the ghost of a man who no longer had any power over me. The vanishing point was behind me. All that lay ahead was space and light and possibility. The first thing I became aware of was the absolute silence. Not the dead silence of shock, but the clean, pressurized quiet of high altitude, broken only by the faint white noise hum of the jet's engines. I woke disoriented, the weight of the last 24 hours of physical pressure on my chest. Then memory rushed in, the rooftop, the helicopter, Julian's ashen face on the screen. I sat up, the butter-soft leather of the seat creaking. Outside the window was an endless expanse of cotton wool clouds, stained pink by a sun that was now high in a sky I'd left behind. I was untethered in every sense. There was no ground below me, no past behind me that I could bear to look at, and a future that was as formless as the mist we flew through. The burner phone Leo had given me sat on the table beside a carafe of water. I powered it on. It had no internet browser, no social apps, just a call log with one number. But it did have a basic news aggregator. I opened it. The headlines were a symphony of scandal. Thorne heirs wedding day from hell. Bride flees, reveals lover in explosive video. Suitable merger. Society bride Alara Vance vanishes after public broadcast of groom's betrayal. Thorne Holdings stock plummets as blueprint, scandal rocks dynasty. I scrolled, a detached observer to my own destruction. There were grainy screenshots from the video. Julian and Sophia on the sofa, my pale, furious face. Articles dissected the blueprint, quote, analyzed the Thorne family's history of arranged alliances, dug into Sophia Moreau's past. One tabloid had already found her ex-husband in Geneva, who gave a quote, "Sophia always had a talent for being where the money was. The boy. A useful prop, but his paternity was always nebulous." The comment sections were a wildfire. The court of public opinion had convened, and Julian was being eviscerated. He thought he was playing 4D chess with a human life. Alara Vance is my new hero. The ultimate mic drop. The arrogance to bring the mistress to the wedding house days before? He deserved this and more. Thorne Holdings is toxic. Selling all shares. A smaller, uglier faction blamed me. She humiliated him publicly? Couldn't just leave a note? She's clearly unstable. But they were drowned out by the roar of support for the runaway bride. I felt nothing. No vindication, no sorrow. It was like reading about strangers. The Alara in those headlines was a character, a symbol. I was just a woman on a plane hollowed out. The jet began its descent into Zurich. The Alps rose like broken teeth through the clouds, majestic and indifferent. By the time we touched down, I had formulated the next steps with the cold logic that was now my only compass. I disembarked into a private terminal, my single suitcase rolling behind me. The air was crisp, tinged with jet fuel and mountain cold. As agreed, there was no one to meet me. I was a ghost. In the bustling main terminal, I found a bank of lockers. From my suitcase, I retrieved a padded envelope. Inside was the burner phone, the SIM card physically destroyed, and a thank you note for Kieran Blackwood on plain paper. I sealed it and placed it in a locker, texting the number and code to Leo's number from a payphone. Our business was concluded. Next, I visited 3 different currency exchange kiosks, converting a modest amount of cash into Swiss francs and euros from different stacks. I bought a prepaid Swiss SIM card with data from a vending machine. Then from the main station I boarded not the direct train to Garmisch-Partenkirchen I'd originally planned, but a local commuter train to St. Gallen. I sat by the window watching the orderly, postcard-perfect Swiss countryside roll by, ensuring I wasn't followed. In St. Gallen I exited the station, walked 3 blocks, ducked into a department store and exited through a different door into a taxi. Hauptbahnhof bitte, I said, returning to the same station I'd just left. There I finally purchased a ticket for the long, winding train journey into the heart of the Bavarian Alps. It was on this final leg, as forests and sheer rock faces replaced suburbs, that the numbness began to crack. Maybe it was the relentless rhythmic clatter of the tracks, a sound like a ticking clock counting away the old life. Maybe it was the sheer, overwhelming beauty of the world outside. A world that didn't know or care about Julian Thorne or society scandals. Tears came silent and hot, streaking down my face. I cried for the lost dream, for the love I'd genuinely felt, for the profound humiliation of being so completely fooled. I cried for the version of myself that had believed in fairy tales, now dead and buried under a mountain of evidence and betrayal. I didn't fight it. I let the grief wash through me, a necessary purge. By the time the train pulled into the picturesque station of Garmisch-Partenkirchen, nestled under the jagged crown of the Zugspitze, I was spent, but clean. The hollow feeling remained, but it was no longer filled with shock. It was empty space ready for new foundations. I had rented a small furnished apartment under the name Evern, using an old academic alias and a shell corporation I'd set up years ago on a whim. It was a top-floor studio in a traditional Bavarian building with wooden beams, a view of sloping roofs and distant peaks, and, most importantly, fast, reliable fiber-optic internet. For the first week I did nothing but exist. I slept 12 hours a night. I walked for hours along forest trails, the cold air burning my lungs clean. I ate simple food from the market. I read novels in German, struggling with the grammar, losing myself in the effort. I allowed myself to be a convalescent. But the engineer in me couldn't stay dormant for long. The same mind that had planned the meticulous strike against Julian needed a new project, a positive outlet for its precision and its rage. One evening, staring at the majestic, snow-capped Alps turning pink in the sunset, I thought about systems. Julian's world was a system, a rigid, predatory one of status and bloodlines. It had failed because it discounted my humanity, my agency. I'd exploited that flaw to break it. What system could I build? I booted up my laptop, connecting through multiple encrypted layers. I opened a blank ID. My fingers hovered over the keys. I had no desire to go back to corporate tech to build someone else's dream. I wanted to build something useful. Something that empowered agency rather than exploiting it. An idea slow and tentative began to form. In my old life, I'd done pioneering graduate work on neural networks for predictive maintenance in complex systems, anticipating failure in power grids, transit networks. What about a personal system? A tool not for corporations but for individuals? A private AI-driven platform that could integrate a person's digital footprint, calendars, communications, financial patterns, even social media sentiment, not to sell ads but to provide insight. It could flag inconsistencies in a partner's stories, analyze financial documents for hidden liabilities, assess the health of one's own professional network. A tool for due diligence, for self-protection. A digital guardian that helped people see the systems around them clearly. I would call it Lumina. A light in the fog. It was a reaction to my own blindness, yes. But it wasn't about paranoia. It was about clarity. About equipping people with the tools to see the blueprints of their own lives, so no one could secretly draft them into a story they never agreed to. The work became my anchor. I coded through the nights, the alpine silence a perfect cocoon for deep focus. I reached out cautiously to 2 former classmates from MIT. Anya, a cryptography wizard now in Oslo, and Ben, a UX genius disillusioned with Silicon Valley. I used a secure channel, my proposal stripped of all personal detail, framed purely as a technical and ethical challenge. Imagine a platform where the user is the sole shareholder of their own data, and the AI's only mandate is to serve their clarity and security. It was a siren call to brilliant minds tired of the extractive tech model. Within weeks we had a crude prototype. The Lumina core was born in lines of code transmitted across encrypted servers, A company with no address, whose first 3 employees were in 3 different countries, connected only by a shared belief in building something that didn't lie. Meanwhile, the world's news cycle moved on, but the Thorn scandal had permanent ripple effects. Lena, now my chief intelligence officer in the old world, sent me occasional encrypted updates. Thorn stock still down 18%. Board is furious. Old man Thorn forced Julian to take a leave of absence, and shipped him off to oversee interests in Singapore, a glorified exile. Sophia Moreau was completely torn apart online. Fled to Monaco last I heard. The paternity question is the gift that keeps on giving. Your parents, they're hurt and worried about you, but they understand. I showed them the evidence. Your dad said he's proud you didn't just take it. That last one made me cry again, but this time the tears were softer. One afternoon 6 months after my arrival, I was debugging a stubborn query algorithm when a news alert popped up on a monitored feed. Blackwood Capital wins Docklands bid in stunning upset over Thorn Holdings. A small, hard smile touched my lips. Kieran Blackwood had used his severance package well. The checkmate was complete. I closed the news tab and returned to my code. The past was a closed ledger. Lumina was my future. Here, in this quiet room at the top of the world, I was no longer the woman who had been betrayed. I was the architect again. But this time I was building something that could never be taken from me. I was building a lighthouse, and my own light was finally, slowly beginning to glow again from within. 3 years is a long time to be a ghost. It's enough time for a sapling to become a young tree, for a new language to settle on your tongue, for the sharp edges of heartbreak to weather into a familiar, navigable landscape. For Lumina, it was enough time to evolve from a defiant spark in an alpine apartment to a humming, globally distributed network with a waiting list of 50,000. We never took venture capital. Anya, Ben, and I bootstrapped it into existence with the remains of my personal trust and their own savings, fueled by a near-maniacal belief in our core principle: user sovereignty. Every line of code, every encryption protocol, every minimalist interface element was a rebuttal to the world that had tried to commodify me. Lumina didn't sell data. It taught people to read their own. Our users were a quiet, powerful diaspora. Entrepreneurs running due diligence on potential partners, individuals navigating tricky divorces, artists protecting their IP, survivors rebuilding after manipulation. We didn't advertise. Growth came through hushed, grateful referrals in secure forums. Our headquarters was a shifting set of encrypted servers. Our faces were unknown. My life in Garmisch had settled into a deeply productive rhythm. My German was now fluent, with a slight Bavarian lilt that made shopkeepers smile. I knew the best trails for spring wildflowers and the quietest corner of the local Stiftskeller to work in. I'd even adopted a stubborn one-eared rescue cat I named Klaus, who disapproved of my coding marathons but adored the view from the windowsill. I was a Lara Verne here. A somewhat reclusive, polite tech consultant who worked odd hours. The scandal of Alara Vance was a faint, foreign echo. Occasionally, a German business magazine would run a retrospective on the Thorn fiasco, but my photo was always the same 3-year-old society shot. A woman who no longer existed. The calm was a fortress I had built stone by stone. And like any fortress, its strength was tested not by a frontal assault, but by a ghost at the gate. It happened on a crystalline autumn afternoon. The IPO for Lumina's parent company, Verne Systems AG, had just closed on the New York Stock Exchange. We'd done it not for the money but for the legitimacy, the bulletproof transparency that came with being a publicly traded entity. It was our final, unassailable declaration of independence. The press coverage was immense but focused on the tech, the philosophy, the mysterious founders who gave no interviews. I was in my apartment wearing soft sweatpants and an old MIT hoodie, a rare glass of Riesling in hand, watching the financial news on mute. A ticker tape ran along the bottom. Verne soars 45% on debut. Lumina, mystery fuels investor frenzy. My burner phone, a new, secure model I used only for Lumina business, vibrated. It was Ben on our encrypted channel. Alara, you need to see this. A link followed. It was to a popular tech gossip site. The headline made my blood run cold. Is Lumina's elusive founder, Verne, the runaway bride of Thorn's scandal? The article was a piece of digital sleuthing. Some enterprising, ruthless blogger had cross-referenced the scant details about Verne, an MIT background in systems engineering, a focus on trust and security architecture, a company incorporated in Switzerland, with the known history of Alara Vance. They'd even found an old, buried patent application I'd filed years ago, co-authored under my maiden name and my academic alias. The connection was speculative but damningly logical. They'd used a facial recognition algorithm on the grainy screenshot from my IPO day photo. My back was to the camera on the NYSE balcony, but my profile was partially visible, and found a 78% match to the runaway bride. The comments section was already a war zone. My newfound hero status as the founder of a privacy-focused unicorn was crashing into my old notoriety. The narrative was being rewritten in real time. She didn't just run, she built an empire from the ashes. Bunik. Versus. So her whole ethical tech shtick is just personal revenge? How pathetic. The fortress walls trembled. My anonymity, my hard-won peace, was unraveling in the span of a single blog post. I was drafting a terse strategic response to Ben when the second intrusion came. This one was physical. A knock at my apartment door. Not the cheerful rap of my landlady, Frau Weber, coming to offer Apfelkuchen. This was firm, deliberate, heavy. Klaus hissed, his fur standing on end. I froze, my glass halfway to my lips. No one visited me here. No one except Lena, who had a standing invitation but always called first. The knock came again, more insistent. Silently, I padded to the door and peered through the peephole. The world tilted. Standing in the dimly lit hallway of my Bavarian apartment building was Julian Thorne. He looked both the same and utterly transformed. The effortless, polished elegance was still there in the cut of his charcoal overcoat, but it hung on a frame that seemed leaner, harder. His face was still devastatingly handsome, but it was carved with new lines, of fatigue, of something that might have been contrition. His storm-gray eyes, which I had once drowned in, now held a desperate, haunted intensity. In his hands he held a simple bouquet of edelweiss, the white flowers absurdly fragile and out of place. My breath caught in my throat. 3 years of carefully managed distance evaporated. He was a ghost from a burned-down house, standing in my new foyer. How? The blog post had just gone up. He must have been monitoring my name, my aliases, with a relentlessness that spoke of obsession. He'd moved fast. The knock came a third time. Alara. His voice, muffled by the thick wood, was rough. I know you're there. Please. Every instinct screamed to stay silent, to let him believe he was wrong. But a colder, harder part of me, the part that had faced him down on a screen watched by millions, reasserted itself. Hiding now would feel like a retreat. And I was done retreating. I took a deep, steadying breath, unlocked the door and opened it just wide enough to see him fully, my body blocking the entrance. For a long moment we just stared at each other. The air between us crackled with the static of 1,000 shattered memories and 3 years of silence. You found me, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the tremor I felt inside. He flinched as if the sound of my voice was a physical blow. His eyes drank me in, taking in my hoodie, my bare feet, the cat peering suspiciously around my ankles. I saw him note the changes in me, the stronger set of my shoulders, the calm in my gaze that was no longer innocence but earned peace. You're harder to find than a black hole, he said, attempting a smile that died before it reached his eyes. He thrust the flowers forward awkwardly. These are for you. They grow on the cliffs here. They symbolize courage. I didn't take them. What do you want, Julian? He let his arm fall, the flowers brushing against his coat. To see you. To talk. For 5 minutes. That's all. We said everything that needed to be said 3 years ago. Through a video feed, if you recall. He had the grace to look stricken. I deserve that. I deserve all of it. But Alara, those weren't my last words. They can't be. He took a half step forward, his voice dropping to a pained whisper. I've spent every day of the last 3 years regretting them. Regretting every second I didn't see you for what you were. And what was that? I asked, my tone lethally quiet. An acceptable merger? A blueprint? The love of my life. The words rushed out of him, raw and unvarnished. I was a blind, arrogant fool. I was so fixated on a ghost from my past, on a fantasy of tragic love, that I couldn't see the real, extraordinary woman standing right in front of me. You weren't a pawn, Alara. You were the queen. And I threw the game. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. It was a performance, perhaps, but it felt terrifyingly real. The Julian I knew never showed vulnerability like this. The Julian I knew was a fortress of cool control. This man looked broken. I read about Lumina, he continued, his gaze sweeping past me to the simple book-lined room, the powerful computers humming quietly. What you've built, it's incredible. It's everything that's brilliant and principled and strong about you. I always knew you were brilliant, but I never understood your depth. I was too busy trying to fit you into my own shallow, selfish script. He took another step. I didn't move back. The threshold of my home felt like a moral line I wouldn't let him cross. Singapore was a punishment, he said, answering a question I hadn't asked. My grandfather's way of burying the embarrassment. I went. I worked. I sat in a glass office overlooking a harbor and thought of nothing but you. Of the way you argued with me about quantum physics. Of the way you'd bite your lip when you were concentrating. Of the sound of your laugh. Thought I was haunted by Sophia. I was wrong. I've been haunted by you. By the future I destroyed. He was close enough now that I could smell his cologne, something unfamiliar and less polished than he used to wear. I've changed, Lara. The man who said those things. He died the moment you walked away. Is there any chance you could ever look at me and not see him? The question hung in the hallway, fragile as the edelweiss in his hand. I looked at him. I saw the pain, the regret, the desperate hope. And beneath it all, I still saw the architect of my deepest hurt. The man who had looked at our love and seen a spreadsheet. The grief I'd processed, the anger I'd transmuted into purpose. It all coalesced into a single, unshakable certainty. Julian, I said, my voice softer than I intended. I see you. I see the regret. And I believe it might be real. But some things once broken can't be glued back together. The trust is gone. The foundation is ash. You can't build a new house on that. His face crumbled. So that's it? No second chance. No possibility. The second chance, I said gently, firmly, was the life I built after I left. I took it. This, I gestured between us, isn't a chapter we can revisit. It's a closed book. He stood there, absorbing the finality. The ghost of his old arrogance flickered for a second. A tightening of his jaw, a flare in his eyes, as if he wanted to argue, to negotiate. But it faded, replaced by a profound, weary acceptance. He nodded slowly, then placed the bouquet of edelweiss carefully on the small table just inside my door. A surrender. I'll go, he whispered. I needed you to know. However you remember me, please know that my greatest regret, my only real regret, is losing you. Not the scandal, not the money. You. He turned and walked down the hall, his footsteps echoing in the stairwell. I watched him go until he disappeared from view. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against the solid wood, my heart pounding. Klaus rubbed against my legs, a soft, living anchor to the present. I looked at the edelweiss on the table. Flowers of courage. Picked from a cliff face. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel sorrow. I felt a quiet, overwhelming sense of closure. The final ghost had been laid to rest. He had seen the woman I became, and he had acknowledged his loss. The circle was complete. Walking to my desk, I picked up the secure phone and called Ben. Release the prepared statement, I said, my voice steady. Confirm my identity as Ilara Vance, founder of Lumina. Frame the narrative. Past personal experience with betrayal informed a commitment to building tools for clarity and self-sovereignty. No further personal comment will be made. It was time to stop being a ghost. It was time for Ilara Verne, founder, to step fully into the light on her own terms. The runaway bride was gone. The architect was here to stay. The silence after Julian left was profound. It wasn't the empty quiet of before, but a saturated stillness, heavy with the echo of his confession and the final click of the closing door. Klaus wound around my ankles, a grounding, purring presence. I looked at the edelweiss, white and stark against the dark wood of the entry table. A symbol of courage left by a man who, in the end, lacked the courage to be honest when it mattered most. I did not move them. They would wilt there, a testament to an ending. My heart was a strange, calm lake after a storm. The last ripple of the past had reached my shore and receded. There was no anger left, only a crystalline certainty. He had seen me, the real me, the builder, the survivor, and he had named his loss. It was enough. It was the final sentence in a book I could now shelve. But his visit was a warning flare. The carefully constructed dam of my anonymity had been breached. The tech gossip blog speculation was now a siren call for every other outlet. I could already imagine the headlines being drafted. Runaway bride turns tech titan. Ilara Vance breaks silence. Control. It was the lesson I'd learned in the hardest way possible. I had to seize control of the narrative or it would be seized for me. I walked to my desk, the familiar hum of my servers a comforting mantra. I opened the secure channel to Ben and Anya. He was here. I typed the word Stark on the screen. Ben's response was immediate. Who? Thorn? How? Are you all right? I'm fine. It's over. But the cat's out of the bag. We execute phase 1 of the transparency protocol. No. We had planned for this. Not for Julian specifically, but for the inevitable moment when Vern would be unmasked. Our philosophy was built on clarity. We had to embody it. Anya's reply was all business. Encrypted press packet is ready. Verified statements from your academic advisors and early collaborators are preloaded. The Origins page on the Lumina site is queued for update. We go live in 60 minutes? Make it 30, I responded. And Ben, pull the metrics for the Trust Gap white paper. We lead with the data, not the drama. 30 minutes later, from my quiet Alpine apartment, I changed the course of my public life. I didn't give an interview. I didn't appear on camera. I published. On the Lumina homepage, a new section appeared. Origins and Principle. It contained a concise, unemotional statement. To our Lumina community, recent speculation has connected my personal history with the mission of this company. I am Ilara Vance, founder of Lumina. Several years ago, I experienced a profound personal betrayal rooted in deception and a systemic imbalance of power and information. That experience was a catalyst but not the blueprint. Lumina was built not from a place of vengeance, but from a conviction that individuals deserve sovereignty over their own digital lives and the clarity to navigate complex human systems. My past informed the question, how do we protect personal agency? But the answer was built by a brilliant team dedicated to ethics, cryptography, and human-centric design. My personal story is mine alone. Lumina's story belongs to every user who employs it to seek truth, secure their boundaries, and make informed choices with confidence. That mission remains unchanged and my commitment to it is absolute. With clarity. Ilara Vance, founder and CEO Vern Systems AG. Attached were my academic credentials, patent filings, and testimonials from Anya and Ben about the early technical vision. There was no mention of Julian Thorne, no mention of weddings or scandals. It was a dignified reclamation of my name and a fierce redirect towards the work. The internet predictably exploded. But the tenor was different this time. The tech press, initially salivating for scandal, seized on the narrative of trauma transformed into innovation. Forbes ran a piece. From personal ashes, a phoenix of privacy. Ilara Vance's Lumina redefines ethical tech. The business sections analyzed our no VC model as a revolutionary stance. My past was now a compelling footnote to a much bigger story. A story of resilience and building something that mattered. Lena called on our secure line, her voice crackling with gleeful fury. You magnificent bastard. You turned his little visit into a global PR launch. Do you know what this is doing for our waitlist? It's crashed the server twice. It's not a PR launch, I said, watching the real-time user metrics scroll on a secondary monitor. They were indeed skyrocketing. It's damage control turned to purpose. Same difference, honey. You won. You absolutely finally won. Had I? Winning implied a competition and I was no longer competing with Julian. I was building in a different universe altogether. But the feeling was one of solid ground under my feet. The ground I had made. A week later, a different kind of letter arrived. Not an email, but thick, cream-colored stationery, couriered to a Vern Systems AG legal proxy in Zurich and forwarded to me. The handwriting was a precise, commanding script I recognized from wedding invitation proofs. Miss Vance, please accept this communication from Archibald Thorne. I will not insult your intelligence with platitudes or excuses for my grandson's unconscionable behavior. What he did was a moral and strategic failing of the highest order, for which he has been and continues to be held accountable. I write to you now not as a grandfather, but as the chairman of Thorne Holdings. Your company, Lumina, represents a paradigm shift. Your commitment to ethical data sovereignty is not a marketing ploy. It is the future. Thorn Holdings is embarking on a comprehensive restructuring and modernization of our data governance policies. We find ourselves in need of the very principles you have so successfully codified. We would like to formally engage Vern Systems AG as consultants to audit and redesign our internal data ethics framework. This is a business proposal, nothing more. The fee would be substantial and the work would be entirely on your terms. Consider it, if you will, a long overdue debt being paid to the ecosystem you are helping to build. Respectfully, Archibald Thorne. I read it 3 times. It was a staggering document. An olive branch wrapped in a business proposition, wielded by the patriarch of the dynasty that had exiled me. It was an admission of guilt, a recognition of my power, and a nakedly pragmatic attempt to harness my credibility to salvage his own. I discussed it with Anya and Ben. Ben was immediately suspicious. It's a trap. They want to mine our methodologies or use our name for legitimacy without real change. Anya was more analytical. The financial offer is significant. It could fund our next 2 development cycles without touching our capital reserves. And the reputational boost of forcing a conglomerate like Thorne to reform, it's a powerful signal to the market. I thought for a long time, gazing at the Alps. This was the ultimate test of my own principles. Was my mission about punishing the past or shaping the future? My reply to Archibald Thorne was as concise as his. Mr. Thorne, Vern Systems AG will consider a consulting proposal, subject to the following non-negotiable conditions. 1. A full independent audit of Thorn Holdings' current data practices, the results of which will be made public in a transparency report co-branded by our firms. 2. Lumina's user sovereignty principles will form the absolute baseline for the new framework, with no exceptions or carve-outs. 3. The consulting team will have unfettered access and final approval on all system designs and policy changes. 4. Julian Thorne will have no involvement, direct or indirect, in this project at any level. If these terms are acceptable, our general counsel will contact yours. Sincerely, Lara Vance. It was a brutal set of terms. I was demanding the right to humiliate them publicly with an audit, to impose our will completely, and to formally exile Julian from the process. It was power, pure and simple. To my surprise and slight disappointment, Archibald Thorne agreed within 48 hours. The old lion was pragmatic to his core. His empire was bleeding relevance. My credibility was the transfusion he needed. Julian's feelings were clearly a secondary concern. The work, when it began, was intensely satisfying. It was the final act of my revenge, but one he would never see. My team of ethical engineers and lawyers descended on Thorn Holdings, not with scorn, but with the dispassionate rigor of surgeons. We found the rot we expected: exploitative data clauses, hidden tracking, predatory internal surveillance of employees. We excised it line by line and rebuilt their policies with Lumina's architecture. The public transparency report, when released, caused another stock dip, but was hailed as a watershed moment for corporate accountability. Thorn Holdings was rebranding through fire, and I held the torch. Through it all, I never saw or spoke to Julian. He was, as demanded, a non-entity. I heard through the industry grapevine that he had resigned from the Thorn board entirely and was traveling, purpose unknown. I felt nothing. He was a closed file. One evening, months after the Thorn project had concluded successfully, I was walking Klaus along the familiar path by the Partnack Gorge. The air was cold and clean, the roar of the glacial river a constant thunder below. My phone buzzed with a news alert. I almost ignored it, but the name caught my eye. Julian Thorne announced Clean Slate Foundation, focused on legal aid for financial and emotional fraud victims. I stopped walking. I opened the article. There was a photo of him looking lean and serious, not in a boardroom but at a desk in a modest-looking office. The quote from him was brief. I have spent years understanding the profound damage caused by deception and the abuse of power. This foundation is my lifelong commitment to helping others navigate and overcome the traps I once helped design. Could have been another calculated PR move. But the specificity of it, emotional fraud, felt like a direct, private acknowledgement. He wasn't trying to win me back. He was trying in his way to burn the blueprints he'd lived by. I put my phone away. A gust of wind whipped down the gorge, carrying the scent of pine and icy water. Klaus meowed impatiently, tugging at his leash. I looked up at the narrow ribbon of sky between the towering cliffs. I had come here to hide, to heal, to build a fortress. But I had built something else instead. A beacon. And in its light, the shadows of the past had finally lost their power to frighten me. The runaway bride had vanished. The scandal had faded. The architect had built her masterpiece. And now for the first time I was simply Alara. Not a victim, not a symbol, not a founder on a mission. Just a woman on a mountain path with a cat and a quiet heart, walking home under a sky full of stars. The unveiling was complete. The story was mine. Years have a way of softening edges, not by erasing them but by building new landscapes around them. The jagged peaks of my pain are still there, but they are no longer the only feature on the horizon. They've become part of the geology of who I am, foundational, immutable, but distant from the daily weather of my life. 5 years after I left Julian Thorne at the altar, the world knows Alara Vance. Not as a runaway bride but as the CEO of Verne Systems, a leading voice in ethical AI, and a philanthropist whose foundation funds digital literacy and privacy advocacy in underserved communities. The scandal is a biographical footnote, a catalyst for change mentioned in polite, respectful profiles. Lumina is used by millions. We've successfully sued 3 data brokers into oblivion. Anya, Ben, and I have been called the conscience of Silicon Valley, a title we find darkly amusing from our various mountaintops across Europe. My home is no longer the rented studio in Garmisch. I bought a converted timber frame barn on a south-facing slope a little higher up the valley. It's all soaring ceilings, warm wood and glass that frames the Zugspitze like a living painting. Klaus, now a dignified, portly gentleman, prefers the sunbeams on the heated floor. The quiet is profound, broken only by the wind in the firs and the gentle ping of servers in the soundproofed office wing. I have a life. A good one. It is built on integrity, chosen solitude and deep, abiding friendships with the handful of people who truly know me. There have been discreet, intelligent men and women who've expressed interest over the years, but I've kept my heart carefully, comfortably to myself. The trust that was shattered takes longer to rebuild than any company. Some fractures are permanent and I've made peace with that. My happiness is not contingent on a partner. It is rooted in purpose, peace, and the simple pleasure of a well-written line of code or a perfect hike at dawn. Today, however, is different. Today the outside world is coming to my mountain. Not as an invader but as an invited guest. Wired magazine, after years of declined requests, has been granted an interview. Not about my past but about the future. Specifically our new open-source initiative, Lumina Core, which aims to put our core privacy architecture into the public domain. The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Clara with a reputation for depth, is due at noon. I feel a flutter of something, not anxiety but a keen awareness of exposure. I am in control of this narrative, but it is still a performance. I'm in the kitchen grinding coffee beans, when Lena's face flashes on the wall-mounted screen for our weekly video call. Her hair is a different color, a vibrant silver, and her grin is the same. Big day, boss. You ready to charm the pants off the tech press? I'm planning to be terminally boring. All protocols and principles. Sure you are. Just don't accidentally drop any hints about your secret mountain cult. They'd probably join. Her smile softens. Seriously, Elle. You look good. Really good. I feel good. And I mean it. The doorbell chimes, a soft, melodic tone. She's here. Talk later. Clara is exactly as her byline suggests. Observant, calm, and disarmingly direct. We sit in the sun-drenched living area with its view of the valley. She doesn't mention the past. We talk about federated learning, about encryption methodologies, about the dangers of centralized data power. The interview is flowing, technical, and respectful. I feel myself relaxing into the subject I love. Then, as the afternoon light begins to lengthen, she leans back slightly. A final, more philosophical question, if I may. Lumina is fundamentally about restoring agency and preventing manipulation. It was born from a deeply personal understanding of those concepts. Do you ever worry that in building tools to protect people from deception, you're implicitly suggesting that trust is obsolete? That we should all live in a state of benign suspicion? It's a brilliant question. The kind that cuts to the heart of everything. I take a moment watching a hawk circle on a thermal outside the window. No, I say finally. I don't think trust is obsolete. I think informed trust is the only trust that's real. Blind trust is just faith, and faith can be placed in terrible things. Lumina isn't a tool for suspicion. It's a tool for clarity. Clarity is what allows for real trust to be built. Or just as importantly, to be withdrawn with dignity when it's betrayed. It's about replacing guesswork with knowledge. That doesn't kill connection. It makes genuine connection possible. Clara nods slowly, typing a note. So it's about empowerment, not paranoia. Exactly. You can't be truly empowered in the dark. She leaves an hour later, promising a draft for my review. The house settles back into its deep quiet. I feel drained but clear, as if the interview has been its own form of consolidation. As dusk paints the peaks in shades of rose and violet, I pull on a fleece and take Klaus for his evening walk. The path is familiar, a soft carpet of pine needles underfoot. The air is cold enough to see my breath. This is my liturgy, my daily reaffirmation of a life chosen, not inherited. My phone buzzes in my pocket. It's a number I don't recognize with a Swiss prefix. I almost ignore it, but something, a twist of old instinct, makes me answer. Alara Vance. My voice is crisp in the cold air. Ms. Vance. This is Dr. Adler at the Krankenspital in St. Moritz. The voice is professional, tinged with urgency. I'm calling regarding Julian Thorne. He's listed you as his emergency contact. The world narrows to the sound of the wind in the pines and the doctor's voice. Emergency contact. A relic from a life erased, a piece of administrative debris he'd never cleaned up. Or perhaps a deliberate last-ditch choice. What's happened? My voice is steady, but my grip on the phone is tight. A skiing accident off-piste. Serious but stable. Multiple fractures, a concussion. He was incoherent upon arrival but kept asking for you. He's sedated now. As his listed contact, we needed to inform you. I stand frozen on the path. Klaus tugs at his leash, confused. A storm of conflicting impulses wars inside me. The part that never wants to hear his name again. The part that is, irrevocably, a human being who cannot ignore another's suffering. The part that is still, in some dusty file drawer of a hospital computer, his someone. I'm not his family, I say, my tone colder than the air. You should contact his grandfather, Archibald Thorne. He is en route from London. But Mr. Thorne was quite insistent about you. Given the circumstances, we felt obliged to call. Insistent. Even concussed, even broken, he was trying to reach across the chasm. Thank you for informing me, doctor. I am not, however, responsible for him. Please direct all future communication to his family. I end the call. I stand there for a long time, until the cold seeps through my fleece and Klaus whines in protest. I turn and walk back to the house, my steps mechanical. Inside, the warmth feels artificial. I pour a glass of water but don't drink it. I see the ghost of the Edelweiss on my old entry table. Courage. I'm not the same woman he knew. I am not the woman who ran or the woman who built a company out of spite. I am someone who values clarity, integrity, and the definitive end of chapters. But I am also someone who understands that endings can have codas. That healing isn't linear, and that sometimes, the final piece of letting go is an act of simple, unburdened humanity. I do not owe him anything. Not forgiveness, not comfort, not a single second of my hard-won peace. Yet, I pick up my phone. I do not call the hospital. Instead, I send a single, unambiguous text to the number Archibald Thorne used years ago. Julian is in Krankenspital St. Moritz. Ski accident. You are his contact. I am not. This is the last communication. I press send. It is clean. It is clear. It provides necessary information without entanglement. It is an act of basic human decency, delivered from a safe, unassailable distance. It is, in its own way, the final word. I block the number. Then I go to my office. I open the Lumina core schematics. I lose myself in the elegant logic of the code, in the pure, beautiful math of a system designed to protect, not to harm. This is my world. This is my creation. Later, as I prepare for bed, the news alert pops up on my screen. It's a brief item in the Financial Digest. Archibald Thorne visits grandson in Swiss hospital after accident. Recovery expected. I close the tab. I look at Klaus curled in his bed. I look at the stars blazing over the dark silhouette of the mountains. The past has made its last feeble grasp. I have chosen not to grasp back. The new world I built is quiet and strong and mine. And in its quiet strength I find something I once thought I'd lost forever. Not trust in others, but a profound and unshakable trust in myself. The journey that began in betrayal ends here, in a solitude that is not lonely, in a peace that is not passive, in a life that is finally and completely my own design. The end.